you're not
leaders
opposed to tariffs. I'm saying you're opposed to taxes, and tariffs are taxes.
Taxes are permanent. Tariffs are a negotiating weapon. Why is
Unless you want them to be
every
permanent,
leader of every country
does.
in Europe showing up in Washington every week? They want to cut a deal. You don't like the fact that in 9 weeks we don't have a deal? No administration's ever tried to cut 60 deals at once. All you need to do is pen one. Just pen one, whether it's India or EU or Britain, whatever it is, and that becomes the hallmark of all the rest. That's that stack. And then let's settle with China, because that's a different story. And I love the fact that Xi's getting his head squeezed like a teenage pimple right now. I'm good with that.
They have to have the U.S. market. You've got over 80 countries now, and China being one of them, that are in talks, that are ready to make a deal.
We need to call their hand and slap them to Pluto until they start abiding by fair trading rules. China will ultimately have no choice.
China has been waging a trade war against the United States for decades. Donald Trump is simply trying to fight back on behalf of Americans.
The views from several Republican senators there. New signs that China might be caving in to President Trump's trade war. Beijing is now pulling back its 125% tariffs on some U.S. goods. This as President Trump claims he's spoken with Chinese President Xi many times. China denies it has had any talks with the White House. Let's bring in Gordon Chang. He is a senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute, author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Gordon, first of all, why would China say that they haven't had any talks with the United States if, in fact, President Trump is telling the truth?
I think it's because Xi Jinping has staked his legitimacy on having surpassed the U.S. And so it's very difficult for him to then say, oh, we're bowing to pressure from President Trump and we're going to talk about tariffs and other things. So I think he's boxed himself in. But in general, since he's become China's ruler in late 2012, he has made the political system hostile, where only the most belligerent answers are considered to be acceptable. So he's a very, very thin line which he can walk right now.
Well, President Trump may or may not have to answer the voters in 4 years. I mean, he's thrown out this balloon about running again, but most people, I think, believe he's already a lame duck president. He has to, though, keep members of Congress happy, at the very least. Xi doesn't have to do that, does he? I mean, he is an iron-fisted leader in China. So doesn't he have the ability to be, I don't know, more aggressive than President Trump?
I think that he once did when he was accumulating power from everybody else. But right now, he has near total accountability for what's gone wrong in China. And also, there is a lot of infighting at the top of the Communist Party, especially in the Chinese military, where it seems that his adversaries have now got the upper hand. But also there's civilian infighting as well. And, you know, yes, Donald Trump has all sorts of election deadlines like 2 years from now in the midterms, but Xi Jinping has an election every day. And because there are no rules in that system, he can lose power at any day. So I suspect that every morning that he wakes up and he feels his fingers and his toes, I think he's pretty happy.
So China is making allowances for some U.S. products to be imported without tariffs, right? Does that suggest that they are finding that it's not so easy to block U.S. products?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's not just that they're reducing tariffs. You know, for instance, President Trump reduced tariffs on electronic goods coming in from China. What China has done, which we learned from both the Reuters and the Financial Times reporting yesterday, is that there are no tariffs on certain categories of U.S. goods. So, for instance, aviation parts, semiconductors, medical devices, medicines, industrial chemicals, things that China can't get elsewhere. And they're just coming into China tariff-free.
But the Chinese official statistics are that their economy grew 5.5% in the first quarter of this year. It suggests that things are pretty rosy there.
Yeah, 5.4%. But when we're seeing underlying indicators, John, so for instance, price information from February and December, it shows that China is in a deflationary spiral. That's inconsistent with any notion of robust growth. Also, an official Chinese statistic showed that tax receipts declined 5.3% in the first quarter. That is certainly inconsistent with any sort of sense of above 5% growth. So I think the Chinese economy is contracting. And if it's not contracting, John, it's going to be contracting soon because deflation always kills economic growth.
Well, isn't the danger that, if things get worse in China, and they've already got a real estate crisis, among other things, the things that you mentioned, if things get worse, isn't there a danger that they lash out at the outside world, maybe Taiwan, as a way of, relieving the pressure internally?
Oh, absolutely. And in the last 3 weeks, we've seen provocative Chinese military activity directed not only against Taiwan, but also South Korea, Japan, Philippines, and Australia. Just a couple days ago, we learned that the Chinese unfurled the flag at Sandy Key. That is territory of the Philippines. This is an aggressive act, and it shows that China is becoming much more dangerous externally while it's having its problems internally.
So if you were advising the White House, what would you tell the president to do when it comes to the tariff situation?
Well, I think that President Trump needs to show will and determination. So instead of talking about reducing tariffs, I think that we need to start actually imposing some more costs. So, for instance, China's not taking Boeing aircraft deliveries. We flew back 3 737 MAXs from China that were about to be delivered. Well, if I were President Trump, I would say to Boeing, you can no longer provide services or parts to Chinese airlines because that will ground the Chinese fleet. And I think that will bring the Chinese to heel fairly quickly. But we need to do some things that would be considered unthinkable. This is not the type of normal trade war that people are used to. This is looking like an all-encompassing struggle.
So you advocate tough measures?
Yeah, and when President Trump last week signaled conciliatory moves, the Chinese even got worse. And they were saying, well, no talks until the U.S. removes all tariffs. So our attempts at conciliation were just met with more belligerence on the part of the Chinese. So that can't be good. And that shows that tactic, although it sounds like it should work, is probably not working.